Michael Saylor just dropped a $550 billion Bitcoin bombshell within the same week that a large oil company in Saudi Arabia is now saying that they're going to accept Bitcoin for payment. Is this the end of the petrodollar? And what warning is Michael Saylor sending to all of these Saudi Arabia sovereign wealth funds? Now, let's not listen to me. Let's listen to the man himself, the Giga Chad, Michael Saylor, on what he had to say with all of the sovereign wealth funds.
So tell me, if you're a sovereign wealth fund, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, how would you be diversifying that portfolio? How much Bitcoin would you own?
All of it. To tell you the truth, I always want. I think it's kind of an IQ test. It's like if you had $1 billion and you wanted to double it, you would buy the $1 billion of Bitcoin and put out a press release. But if you wanted to make $1 trillion, you would try to buy as much as my company has right now. You go buy $50 billion worth of Bitcoin and just keep buying, and it'll be $1 trillion to you. So you ought to buy as much as you want money, right?
Yeah.
I think that
$550 billion bombshell from the man himself. And what does Michael Saylor know about all this? Because he said this right around the same time we're seeing the $1 billion Emirates state-owned oil company, Emirates, accepting Bitcoin for gas payments. So it seems like very coincidental timing that we have here. And there's something else. The legend Anthony Scaramucci has also said that the sovereign wealth funds are buying billions worth of Bitcoin. Now let's listen to Mooch and what he had to say about it.
What they're thinking. They explain what their views are. What are they saying about Bitcoin right now? Are they all like buying it up and not announcing it yet, or what's going on?
Yeah, so I think they are. I think they are buying it. I think they're buying it on the margin. I don't think it's going to be a gigantic groundswell of buying until we greenlight legislation in the United States. So if you tell me before the end of the congressional term, we've got a stablecoin regulation, we've got...
So he already came out and said, hey, we are buying, but there's not going to be a big onslaught. But it's interesting on what all Mooch is saying and what Michael Saylor is saying. He threw out the number 550 billion, and it seems coincidental. Maybe he's just tossing out numbers, or maybe, just maybe, Michael Saylor knows how big these sovereign wealth funds are. Well, I would tend to believe that Michael Saylor, the smart man that he is, does know how much these sovereign wealth funds hold. Because look, I mean, 550 billion is just coincidentally extremely close to what Abu Dhabi, $580 billion in their sovereign wealth fund, what the Kuwait, $533 billion in their sovereign wealth fund have. So very, very close numbers. He just picked the middle one here to show, hey, this is potentially why we're seeing the massive amounts of buying. And if you wanted to double it, you would buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and tweet it out. If you wanted to triple or turn your $1 billion into $1 trillion, you would just stack in the background and just let everybody else do their thing. And it's coincidentally all of what we've been seeing. We've been seeing a lot of rumblings that these sovereign wealth funds have been buying Bitcoin for quite some time. In fact, the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund disclosed that they had a $437 million stake in BlackRock's ETF just earlier this year. So we're seeing the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East already starting to disclose their entire holdings. And I think it's interesting because of the way that we're starting to see the global shift away from the dollar. And I think that this is what this is all pointing to, is that these sovereign wealth funds, these large corporations, these giant oil and gas producers, they all know that they are basically moving away from the dollar. Majority of the transactions in the past years were in the dollar, but then you saw a 20% drop from 100% all the way down to 80%. And I know what you're saying. All right, 8 out of 10 transactions are still done in the US dollar. But that 20% is drastically growing, and it's growing over time at an exponential rate that we really haven't seen before. And in fact, we're seeing countries around the globe in the BRICS start to approve the use of digital currencies like Bitcoin for import payments. So if Iran is exporting, importing, and doing all these different things of oil, like many of the BRICS nations are doing, if Saudi Arabia is now exporting oil and gas to different countries and nation states, we might see what my friend in the comments over here, Michelle Weekly, is saying. Instead of that petrodollar, we're going to start to see petro BTC. So we could potentially start to see that shift now that we have the Emirate company accepting Bitcoin and crypto for gas payments. So this is monumental. We're going to start to see more of these companies start to really realistically start to go all in on Bitcoin. And just coincidentally, here while we were recording this, it announced it earlier this morning when I was setting this up that Saudi Arabia plans to invest $600 billion into the United States. And what has the United States recently done? The United States has really gone all in on the Bitcoin and quote digital asset space, right? They're really starting to take a good close look at all of this. There's, more regulation around it. They've been investing in tech. They've been doing all these different kinds of things. And Saudi Arabia is trying to be pretty closely intertwined with the United States because these giant sovereign wealth funds, hey, let's face it, the most secure place previously to hold your money was the United States. Go to the US stock market, go to all these different places, and you're not going to see the return that you see in the United States. Well, if we're starting to see a movement towards digital assets, a movement away from the US dollar, well, you can ingrain yourself in some different way in the United States to make sure that the regulatory pressures are not going to come down and come hammering down on you. But I think the interesting part is there's just so much connection to the quote crypto space with what we're seeing here. Like, look at this. Dubai partners with crypto.com to launch crypto payments for government services. So we're starting to see this shift away from the US dollar outside of own fiat currencies into Bitcoin and other crypto payments. And that's the way that we're starting to go. That's the new wave. We're going to start to see all of these different sovereign wealth funds, all of these different corporations, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. And everybody just start to essentially move towards a new horizon, the new system, so to speak, right? Because we've seen just how successful Bitcoin has been. So, I mean, if you see the way that these the currencies and everything else is starting to shift, we're looking at Bitcoin sitting at the 6th largest asset by market cap. Now, this will keep on growing, and Bitcoin, as more and more money's pumped in, we're going to start to see this start to hum along. And I think, these sovereign wealth funds are starting to see this. I think Michael Saylor sees this. I think Anthony Scaramucci sees this. And I think, we've been seeing the writing on the wall from these big dogs here for quite some time, right? This is updated in February 14th, 2025. So the Middle Eastern city, Abu Dhabi, on Friday disclosed that they had 400 and just under 440 million in the stake of BlackRock's iShares ETF. And the stake was held about Mabudala Investments, one of the country's sovereign wealth funds, and the U.S. Securities Exchange. So the price of Bitcoin rallied a shocking 0.5% when we saw that at the news of 97,400. But regardless of the point, what we're seeing is a global shift away from the US dollar, away from stock market and companies. And as Michael Saylor has put it, 96% of companies just don't outperform the Mag 7. So if you hyper focus into a single investment, whether that's the Mag 7, you'll be able to outperform the market. Now, if you hyper focus into Bitcoin, like MSTR has done, strategy B, you will see a drastic outperform. And in fact, strategy has now strictly outperformed all that we've seen from Bitcoin, and it's seemingly a levered play. And I think that the amount of sovereign wealth funds that we are going to start to see and the amount of money that we're going to start to see into this is going to really change some heads. People are going to be really looking at how these sovereign wealth funds and everything along those lines are starting to change and drastically go into the differences here. But I think the unique aspect of all of this is that it's all tied with BlackRock and the giant money managers that we see, right? So I think one big issue is that we're starting to see just a shift into that. People are thinking, okay, you know what, if these sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin, buying it through the BlackRock ETF, it must be safe, right? Well, not so fast, my friends. Not too long ago, we saw the Kingdom of Bhutan get exposed about buying Bitcoin. Why? Well, because Celsius and BlockFi, the companies that they were buying Bitcoin through, went through bankruptcy. So with this, I always caution people to go and buy these BlackRock and other ETFs just strictly because you need to get your Bitcoin off an exchange. And that's why I've partnered with the great people over at Bitcoin Well. Now, they are strictly self-custodian. So they force you into self-custody, which is great because I think that there's just the fact that they're avoiding any counterparty risk is absolutely the best place to buy Bitcoin in the United States and Canada. But if you haven't signed up for them yet, go to bitcoinwell.com/green candle. You could sign up today. I'm going to give you guys some free sats here by going to the wishing well. So every single time you go to the bitcoinwell.com, buy Bitcoin, they will give you wishing well tokens. So if you sign up with bitcoinwell.com/green candle, you'll get 500, which is one toss. You buy Bitcoin, that's another toss. And these are an opportunity to win up to 1 million sats here at the Bitcoin Well. And all you got to do is just stack Bitcoin. So, or come to the Green Candle live stream. So hit that subscribe button with that bell notification so you guys know. But either way, you buy Bitcoin, you're going to get wishing well tokens. You could set up a DCA straight to cold storage. So go ahead and do that. Either way, here we go. We've got a big toss down that wishing well for you guys. Boom, 600 sats. These crazy lunatics over at Bitcoin Well are increasing the amount of sats that they're giving on every single one. I think yesterday we had 473, I want to say. So 600 today. You're coming into the Green Candle live stream. If you came in yesterday and today, you're getting 1,000 sats. So all the incentive to join the live stream, hit that bell notification and smoke the like Cheech and Chong. Either way, if you didn't get a chance to get those sats, you could go to bitcoinwell.com/green candle, sign up here. Or if you got 50K large, you can go down and they'll walk you through buying Bitcoin. And on top of that, you need to have it in cold storage. I've got it right here, the Bitbox. You could go to bitbox.swiss/green candle. You scroll on down, you use promo code green candle, you get 5% off your entire order. I prefer the Bitcoin only edition. That's what I've got right here. So you can do that. They've got an onboarding bundle if you're not comfortable, as well as a steel wallet where you should hold your seed phrase in the safest, most secure way possible. So do that via the steel wallet, because we're seeing sovereign wealth funds now start to FOMO into Bitcoin. We're seeing oil companies start to accept Bitcoin for payment. This has never happened before. This is a cycle that we've never seen before. And McLovin is saying, hey, I'm really looking forward to flipping gold. BTC is the best asset that's ever existed, and it's not a stock. And that is 100% factual. On top of that, we're seeing companies essentially revolutionize the way that they are starting to, look at their balance sheets. And we're going to get into more of that in a minute. So be sure to stick around until the end, because we're going to be getting into what breaking news just happened. But we've got 100-fold with this first big bull cycle. Welcome along. That is so encouraging to see that. William is saying, I think Samsung Mao Omega candle is coming very soon. And I'm very bullish. I think the same way. If if SWFs went hard, sovereign wealth funds went hard on Bitcoin, it would shake up the market like crazy. I'm sure they know this and prefer to avoid jacking up the price too much. Well, maybe, just maybe, or on the flip side of things, they want to double their money quickly. So maybe they would announce it. It's kind of a toss up, to be honest. So we'll see. And 100-fold is orange pilled this year. That's absolutely electric. Glad to see you're orange pilled. But